Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about the ATF. What is going on at the ATF? I don't know if you heard recently, but the ATF just got a new director. His name is Robert Cekada. So what's going on over there? Robert Cekada and his team just made 34 new regulations regarding the Second Amendment, the gun rights. So let's take a look at what these regulations are, these 34 new regulations and repeals. Take a look here on the computer. So this is the rules and regulations of the ATF. This is the website. So these are the regulations here. So these new regulations, you're going to find proposed rules and notices, comment on regulation. Okay. ATF new era of reform. So these new regulations and repeals, they are in these 5 groups of rules and regulations. They're calling the new era actions taken. And so these are in the repeal group, the modernize group, reduce burden group, clarify group, and align group. All right, so let's take a look at each of them individually here. Let's see what's going on. All right, so in the repeal group, I'm not going to go over all of them. It's going to be a very long video, but just for the gist of it, I'll talk about a couple of them here. They are removing factoring criteria for firearms with attached stabilizing braces. So let's read that here. 1140 AA98, removing factoring criteria for firearms with attached stabilizing braces. ATF is proposing to formalize rescind regulatory changes made in 2023 regarding firearms equipped with stabilizing braces. Multiple federal courts have found that the 2023 rule as codified violated the Administrative Procedure Act, and the rule has been enjoined, stayed, and vacated across numerous jurisdictions. So basically what this is saying here is that stabilizing braces are no longer going to be enforceable, that they're removing the regulatory language that has been largely unenforceable. So stabilizing braces are going away. They're no longer illegal for Second Amendment carriers here. So in the repeal group, here are the regulations and repeals. Removing factoring criteria for firearms with attached stabilizing braces. Revising regs defining engaged in the business as a dealer in firearms. Revising machine gun definition in response to Supreme Court. This is the final ruling. Removing Youth Handgun Safety Act notice. So 2 of these new regulations are very interesting here for the Second Amendment community. The factoring criteria of firearms with attached stabilizing braces. Basically, this rule here is saying this proposal removes regulatory language that has been largely unenforceable, restoring the regulatory definitions to consist with the underlying statutory definitions. So that sounds to me like this is a proposed rule removing the illegality of stabilizing braces. So once again, we are going to be able to have stabilizing braces on our pistols, on our firearms, if this goes into effect. Revising machine gun definition in response to Supreme Court decision. So let's take a look at that. So this is basically redefining the definition for machine gun, what adequates as a machine gun and what does not. This is form of 3 regulatory definitions of machine gun. Basically, this is upholding the decision by Garland versus Cargill, which states that semi-automatic rifles equipped with bump stocks do not satisfy the statutory definition of machine gun under the National Firearms Act. So bump stocks are not going to be classified as machine guns and therefore legal. Okay, so here's the modernized group and the changes of regulations. Revising firearm transaction record, form 4473, firearms electronics record keeping, firearm record retention periods, license easy check, verification for transfers, direct final rule. So this is the final offering right here. Revising non-over-the-counter firearms transaction requirements. Okay, so look at a couple of these here. Revising firearms transaction record. ATF is proposing comprehensive updates for the ATF form 4473, firearms transaction record. The implementation regulations. The proposed rule would, this is once again a proposed rule, streamline the identity and residency verification requirement for transferees. Increase the time period for which a national instant criminal background check remains valid. So if you want to buy multiple firearms, this is going to determine how long that background check is going to be available for. It could be a year, it could be 2 years, 5 years, it could just be a couple of weeks long, rather than have to do a background check every single time you go to that gun store and purchase that firearm. Let's look also at this. Firearm record retention periods. This is very interesting. Records with definite retention periods. Firearms, this is for FFLs. So this is for FFLs, the sellers of the firearms. Federal firearms licensees records the definite retention periods for ATF forms 4473 and acquisition and disposition A&D records. ATF is considering retention periods of either 20 to 30 years and is requesting public comment on the appropriate time frame for certain records. So I know Second Amendment advocates are not going to be okay with a 20 to 30 year period that your record is on file with the federal government and with FFLs. But this is an improvement still from indefinite holding on to period, indefinite retention of federal firearms licensees records. So it's an improvement, but they are looking for comment on this. So definitely, I'm going to show you how to do it later. Go into the website and place your comments on this regulation here that they're looking at. Let's move right along to the next group. This is the reduced burden group. Interstate transport and temporary export of National Firearms Act. Joint registration for spouses under the National Firearms Act. Removing CLEO notification under the National Firearms Act. Clarifying interstate transportation of firearms under the Gun Control Act. Transferring machine guns between qualified licensees, clarifying special occupational tax payments for business activity, removing triplicate filing requirements for importing plastic explosives. Okay, so let's look at a couple of these here. Interstate transport of temporary export of national firearm. ATF is proposing to update the administrative process for transporting lawfully registered national firearms within the United States. So, in my understanding of this regulation here is that they're trying to accommodate with travel. If you're traveling, if you're on vacation, if you're going from point A to point B, how you're able to carry that firearm with beyond state lines from one state to the next state and beyond, for car repairs, for hotel stays, how you're able to secure that weapon, what's required to secure that weapon, going from state A to state B, state C, where have you. And this regulation is a proposal of what they would do about that and how they would regulate those transportation of firearms. Okay, so this is under the Clarify group. Firearms activities in foreign trade zones, customs bonded warehouses. Firearms activities in foreign trade zones, custom bonded warehouses. Important dual use frames, receivers, or barrels. Import training round. Converting temporary to permanent imports for defense articles. Allowing makers to adopt certain markings for national firearms. Clarifying delivery to a common or contract carrier when transporting firearms. Revising definition of adjudicated as a mental defective and committed to a mental institution. Clarifying exceptions to the Brady Act background check requirement. Selecting biological sex on ATF forms. Definition of business premises. Firearms transactions and straw purchases. Creating a definition of willfully for firearms violation. So let's take a look at importing training rounds. So this one here says ATF is proposing to formally clarify in regulation that training rounds, including inert, marking, or simulant projectile products used for training purposes, do not meet the statutory definition of ammunition under the Gun Control Act, and therefore are not regulated under the GCA or the Arms of Export Control Act. So basically, that these simunition rounds are not considered ammunition. And this is also very interesting here. Selecting biological sex on ATF forms. Basically, this here is saying selecting your biological sex on ATF forms. When you fill out that that background check form when you go to purchase your weapon, that you have to put on that document the sex that you were at birth. That means when the doctor birthed you and looked at you and declared you either a male or a female, that is the sex that you have to put on your background check information. Okay, this is for the line group. Conforming change for approving a making application. This is a final ruling. Export control reform, conforming references to Department of Commerce. There's also a final ruling. Update to prescribed countries for important restrictions. Adding component definitions under the Arms Export Control Act. Implementing Patriot Act improvements, contraband, cigarettes, and smokeless. So that's a final ruling. This is one of the only rulings that is not based on firearms or your Second Amendment that they are regulating here. Change to National Firearms Act tax remittance provisions is also a final ruling. Okay, so let's take a look at this one here. Changes to National Firearms Act tax remittance revisions. This is the final ruling. So this goes back to Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill when he signed to reduce the tax remittance rate for certain NFA firearms. So this goes on to the silencers that are now going to be non-tax, so non-NFA items here. So this is a final ruling for that because of the One Big Beautiful Act in order to align regulatory text with a statutory requirement and implement the legal changes that were made according to that bill. So part of the process here for the ATF to create these new rules, laws, regulations is actually our input on this. They want our comments, they need our comments and our feedback, and according to what we, the people, say, will hopefully become part of these regulations, which is what this new director is trying to do here. So go onto this page, regulations.gov, submit your deregulatory recommendations impacted by an existing rule or regulation, share your ideas for deregulation by completing this form. And you submit this form, click on it, look at this, you fill this out. All right, so now we've looked over all the rules, regulations, the repeals, the changes that this new ATF and this Robert Cekada, the new director of the ATF, is trying to implement here. What are your thoughts? What are your opinions? Please go comment, go to the website, go to regulations.gov, go to this site, put in your comments, read on how to write an effective comment, submit it, read the other submissions, go over it. Do you think Robert Cekada is doing good for the people, for the American people, for our Second Amendment rights? Do you think he's still holding back? Give me your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you in the next video.